Yo, what's good YouTube? It's boardzy, and this is going to be a review of the Ninjutso Sora, another 2022 3395 banger of a mouse. This is essentially, to me, an XM1 mini. I'll obviously get into the shape differences later, but it comes in at only 47 grams. Originally, it was advertised at 43, then it changed to 45. On my scale, it's 47. I'm obviously not complaining. I am just clarifying. The weight balancing does feel incredible as well, and it's just all around a very impressive mouse. There are no glaring issues, but I'm just going to cover the entire mouse. Things first is going to be the shape, and the Ninjutso Sora is similar to a lot of shapes, none of which are the G Pro Super Light. One way to look at it is a more XM1-like Pulsar X2 medium. The general size of the mice are similar, but the Sora definitely does flare out a bit more and just has it feels like the XM1's hump profile in the hand more than it does the Pulsar X2. The X2 has a pretty flat and very blocky feeling, while the Sora is definitely a bit more curved. I will say though, for fingertip, I do prefer the shape of the X2 Mini because it's just a thinner, more nimble mouse, and I feel like I can control it a bit better than the Sora. Which does kind of feel like an XM1 if you try to fingertip it, just a bit smaller. I'm sure some people are wondering if the Ninjutso Sora is going to be similar to the Lamzu Atlantis Mini that is going to come out soon, and the answer is no. I'll just throw the shape specs up. The Lamzu Atlantis Mini I think is going to be both shorter and wider than the Sora is. As you can see, the Sora is not going to be as high profile or as wide as the XM1 because it is just essentially a scaled down version. So similar to how I think the Lamzu Atlantis gets you 90% of the way there to an XM2W, I think the Sora gets you 90% of the way there to an XM1 Mini. If that's a shape that you've been like looking for the past few years, I guess, this is the first wireless option that actually feels like it compared to the Pulsar X2 medium, which really just does not feel curved in the same way the XM1 does. But yeah. I also think that this is Ninjutso's first good shape. In my Katana Superlight review, I was like, man, these mice feel good, but the shape really does hold it back, and this is exactly what I asked them to produce, basically. If you do have large hands and already enjoy something like the XM1 or the Lamzu Atlantis, definitely just stick with that. I don't think it's really worth it to downgrade in size unless that is something you are looking for. It's a perfectly usable mouse for fingertip. It will vary based on your grip, but for me, I don't like the fact that I'm gripping right as it flares in the most intense curve. I prefer something flatter on the sides for fingertip, and also just the angle that I grip the mouse from is very tilted, so it makes it a bit hard to consistently flick to the left, at least compared to flicking to the right on a mouse that I have a very consistent and stable grip on, like the Lamzu Atlantis. But personal grip stuff aside, I think this is a solid mouse, especially for people with small to medium hands for all sorts of grip styles. Really, it's a safe shape. But if you do have large hands, for reference, I have 21 by 11 hands. It might be a bit small, even though it does flare out and have some good hump presence in your palm. Next I'm going to talk about, though, is the build quality, because like I said, coming in at 47 grams with a full solid shell, even a solid bottom, you're probably going to think that there are going to be some quality issues, and that's really not the case. I will say the G Pro Superlight has always been my standard for sidewalls. You can just squeeze this thing as hard as you want and it will never flex. The Sora, you can definitely feel a slight flex in the plastic. There is no creak, but obviously this is pressing way harder than anybody would press, and I would say it feels around the same, if not a little bit better than the Viper V2 Pro in terms of shell quality. No rattling of any kind, unlike the glorious Series 1 Pro I just got yesterday. And yeah, all around, even the button quality is very nice. The main switches are Huano black shell pink dots, I believe, and there's no issues with pre-travel, post-travel. The tensioning is all around really good. There's not even a lot of side-to-side movement, which is common on almost every mouse. So it really does seem like they put a lot of effort into quality and just the consistency across the board, because I mean, I'm pretty impressed with this mouse. The Huano main switches are very sharp feeling and spammable. They're not the lightest switches ever. It definitely does take a bit of force to activate them, but they're nothing that is going to be considered heavy. I would say they are even a bit lighter to activate than the Huano blue shell pink dots on the Lamzu Atlantis. So these are definitely solid clicks in game. No noticeable variance between mouse 1 and 2. Actuation force is nice. The side buttons, actually, wait, first I want to mention that this mouse does come on 500 hertz polling rate and 12 ms debounce by default. So if you do wind up getting one, immediately change those settings. I thought it was on 500 hertz, maybe for like battery life reasons, but the battery life seems very good as well. So I don't know, maybe they just didn't bother to change the default settings. But that is besides the point. The side buttons on this mouse are pretty solid as well. They do have a glossy like coating, as you can see. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, these are definitely using a full micro switch, which is nice. You don't want to see companies cheaping out and using dot switches. Very good and spammable. There is a little bit of pre-travel, but it's nothing that really takes away. It just makes the clicks feel a bit lighter, in my opinion. There is no mushiness or post-travel or the side buttons getting stuck, which are like actual issues with the side buttons. I would say these definitely get pass for Fortnite. Good position for my grip styles, as you can see. So overall, good job with the buttons. The scroll wheel, I think it's just a TTC gold encoder, very standard feeling scroll wheel implementation. The design of it does look like the G Pro Superlight scroll wheel. That is the one thing they have in common. Now that I've talked about the top of the mouse, next thing I'm going to talk about is the sensor. It is using a 3395, but it was brought to my attention that the Sora is actually using the same MCU that the Origin 1X did, and that mouse had a 3335 sensor. So I'm not really sure if they are making the most out of the 3395, but still does have motion sync. I was not able to notice anything in terms of motion latency, any sort of floaty feeling, but what I did notice is for some reason, when the mouse is in wired mode, there is like tons of noticeable input lag. It feels like it's on 125 hertz polling. So I don't know what that's about, but I was trying to test if there's any difference in latency, not expecting the wired mode to have like 20 ms more latency. So I mean, I guess if you do use your wireless mouse wired while it's plugged in, they should address that via a firmware update. But in terms of like actual noticeable issues with the sensor implementation while in wireless mode, I could not find any. The LOD felt fine, polling rate consistency felt fine. So yeah, all across the board, no issues with the wireless. For a future batch, I don't see why they couldn't upgrade to the same MCU that the Lamzo Atlantis, Pulsar X2, like all of the other 3395 mice are using. The battery life is solid. I've had my unit for over a week, and I did plug it in to test the wired, so I guess I've charged it once, but it has not died on me. I presume that this thing will blink red when it is eventually going to die. So the battery life does seem around on the same level as 3395s, where it'll last you a week and a half to 2 weeks on a full charge. The stock feet are not going to be the best if you use them on a rougher hybrid textured pad, but if you do use a standard cloth pad, they are going to be more than passable. That is with the four-corner design though, and they do provide these larger Zowie style skates. I don't know why I didn't install them, honestly, but yeah, the stock feet, they were fine in my opinion. Nothing excellent, but they will definitely get the job done. I'm sure there will be aftermarket options in the future. Yeah, besides that, this mouse is pretty simple. There is some dongle storage on the bottom, an on and off switch, and a DPI button. Nothing more than that. They do have a pretty basic software, like I said, and you do want to change those default settings. The coating on this mouse, I thought it was really good the first few days, but then the heat in my apartment went on and I started to get like sweatier hands. I noticed that the coating is a bit more slippery than something that is like the gold standard of coatings like the XM1R or the GPX. So it's not a super rubbery coating, but it does feel less like plain and plasticky than something like the Lamzo Atlantis or the Pulsar X2's coating, even like the G-Wolves coatings. So it doesn't feel like a terrible coating, somewhat similar to the Razer coatings, just not as chalky. So ultimately fine, but if you do have sweaty hands, it might be a bit slippery. You can just throw some grip tape on it, I suppose. I don't know what else there is to cover about this mouse. I feel like that is almost everything. So yeah, I will be giving the Ninjutso Sora the seal of approval. I do think it still has room to improve in future batches, and I can't speak to the quality of mass production. Like I only have my unit, you know, the pre-orders have like just shipped out. But presuming the quality on most units feels like it does on my unit, there's no reason this is not a top mouse recommendation at 47 grams, $95. And yeah, as you can tell by this review, I am just all around impressed by what Ninjutso put out. They had always been copying like these old Microsoft mice, and in my last video I was like, please just make a normal thin ambi mouse, and that is more or less what this is. Like I've said before, similar to an XM1 mini, if that is something that people are looking for. And yeah, I just think it's crazy how many good options there are on the market for 3395 mice that are like in the this is even below 50 grams. This is the only mouse on my desk besides the Starlight that is below 50 grams. Actually, it's not true. There's a 36 gram Viper Mini Wireless review on that coming soon. But yeah, that is going to be all for this video. This is not going to be my main mouse or anything. It's definitely a top option for claw grip, but I just prefer the size of the Lambs of Atlantis since I have larger hands. But it's just crazy how many good options there are available now. I will be making a top mice of 2022 video soon as well. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and that's going to be all. Peace.